Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is not any additional part to the history of Al-Islam in America, but this is but it is certainly in relation to that. By the way, this is your brother in Al-Islam and your brother in humanity, Brother Charles Shabazz of Shabazz Islamic Ministries. So I do want to make this clear. As to, for those who are not familiar with the history of Al-Islam in America, why is it that we have so many heretical Islamic movements in this country? Why is it that these heretical movements have become so popular? I'm sure this is one thing that you guys, especially those who are not familiar with the history of this country, may not understand, because you guys come from countries where the people who brought Islam, brought it to you straight, brought black coffee, no sugar, no cream added, straight black coffee Islam, the way of al-Jama'ah, based on the Quran and the Pseudo Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll tell you why. First of all, there were Muslims who did come from overseas and build masjids and jama'ats, right? The problem with them, however, was they did not bother to do what Muslims in other parts of the world have done, which was, while they may have migrated or settled for like business purposes or for a better life or whatever, the Muslims, the earlier Muslims, first and foremost brought al-Islam. They gave dawah, right, to wherever they went, wherever they visit, they gave dawah. They established the dawah, right? The Muslims here, a lot of them did not establish the dawah here, and while you did have Muslims that built masajids, Islamic communities, they did not even bother to share Islam with everybody else, with the American people. However, when you study, as I shared with you, as far as the Qadianis, the Moorish Americans, and also inshallah, we're going to go into a whole different series on the Nation of Islam. They were the ones who did the dawah, who did their propagation. And the so-called Orthodox people didn't bother to do that. Like I said, there were only a handful of so-called Orthodox communities who actually did establish the dawah during those times. And I mentioned those masjids to you, talked about Professor Muhammad Izzuddin, who was a former member of the Moorish Science Temple, the first Cleveland Mosque, and also the first Muslim Mosque of Pittsburgh, which are, indigenous Muslim communities that were established. And they were the ones that gave the dawah. But and of course, naturally, the indigenous brothers and sisters are gonna do that. When they find Islam, they're gonna share Islam. But let this be a lesson for you guys. Al-Quran says to study the history of those before you, so you can learn from their mistakes and avoid those mistakes. That's what Al-Quran teaches. And the biggest mistake that our brothers and sisters made who had immigrated was while they may have built masjids, they only did it for themselves and their families. They didn't bother to establish the dawah or spread Islam to the American people. This is the mistake that they made. And this is why these movements, these heretical Islamic movements, were quite successful here in this country. While this is the reason why at one point the majority of African Americans follow the heretical beliefs and teachings as opposed to the Quran and Sunnah. But that's what I'm gonna say. Inshallah, I'm gonna do a series on the history of the Nation of Islam, some of which you're familiar with, some of which you are not familiar with. I'm also going to share with you some books and material that I encourage you to study and read. Of course, one book is the autobiography of Malcolm X. To me, that's like the third most important book, third to Al-Quran and Hadith. And there's a book written by a local imam here, named Imam Michael Sahir, called The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, The Man Behind the Men. That is an excellent book if you want to learn about Elijah Muhammad and his mission in the Nation of Islam, stuff that you never heard of before. That's a great book, and this is from the perspective of Al-Jamaat, from those who believe in the Quran and Sunnah. That's one of those books. The other great book is a book written by a former pioneer who passed away a few years ago by the name of Dr. Abdul Salam. He was a dentist, former follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he was also a former follower of Imam Waruddin Muhammad, and then he eventually just practiced the Quran and the Sunnah. Alhamdulillah, he wrote a book called Is the White Man Still the Devil? He wrote that book, but he was basically going over the beliefs and teachings of the Nation of Islam and what Al-Islam teaches, and the correct teachings of Al-Islam based on the Quran and the Sunnah. And then there's a book written by Dr. John Andrew Morrow. It's called Finding W.D. Farad. And this is on the life of the founder of the Nation of Islam, W.D. Farad. Dr. John Andrew Morrow is an Islamic scholar from Canada. He's a revert of Al-Islam, Canadian revert to Al-Islam. He had written an outstanding research book on this. So those are the books that I highly recommend that you guys pick up and study from the Quran and Sunnah standpoint on the Nation of Islam. These are like well researched books. That way you understand what I'll be discussing, what I'll be talking about when I go into the series with you guys. So right now, that's it for tonight. If you like this particular video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. Assalamu alaikum. Peace to everyone else.